Chapter 1. I want a divorce. I am now the CEO of the Thompson Group of Companies, the master of the Thompsons. My father can no longer control me. I am done with your selfishness. Evan Thompson, her husband, towered over her as he yelled. I thought I knew you. I thought you would change. But I was wrong to think that you deserved a chance. Evan, please. Chantel's words broke in and out. This wasn't the first time her husband had brought up the divorce in the past few months. But now he had the divorce papers in his hand. Fear crept into Chantel's heart, knowing how serious he was this time. She reasoned, I thought you were cheating on me. So I did every married woman would do and confront a mistress whom you have been housing in a luxury apartment. I was only helping her. Evan insisted. She isn't a mistress. Why are you so insecure? Nicole has no one. I brought her here to Rose Hills, and she is my responsibility. 2 years ago, Nicole quit her job in Lockwood to be with me. She has no one. Do you hear me? No one. You and father ensured she could not get a decent job. Evan shot back. With a frown, Chantel said back. She could have gotten a decent job if she stayed away from Rose Hills. And with what? No money, in a new town without anyone she knows. Evan retorted. Then, she could go back to Lockwood. Chantel tried to reason. But he cut her off again. That's not the point, Chantel. Haven't you realized it? I do not like to be dictated. Evan said. He pointed at her and described. You think you can control my life? Who do I want to be acquainted with? That's never going to happen, Chantel. Never. I only permitted this marriage because of my father. Because he threatened me with my inheritance, my birthright. Evan added. You realized how unfair that was for me. And what if I cheated? Why would it matter to you? You forced yourself into this marriage. Conspired with my father to trap me in this situation. You knew that I had my eye on Nicole. But did that matter to you? No. You had to squeeze yourself into my life. Evan shot back, his voice strengthening. Force myself into his life? Chantel silently asked. But we have known each other longer. Chantel and Evan had been married for 2 years. Their parents were close friends, and had always said that she and Evan were bound to get married. Evan was the gentle older brother she looked up to when they were young. He treated her kindly, and even blushed at her claims of marrying him. She was 5 years younger than Evan, so her 13-year-old self did not hold back in expressing her love for him back then. Sadly, the time came when Evan had to leave Rose Hills City for his college and master's degree. Evan only visited Rose Hills during holidays since he was often busy, taking 2 majors in college, and managing an offshore branch near Lockwood City. When Evan fully returned to Rose Hills, he was already 25 years old, ready to take on more responsibility in his father's company. He was mature, more brilliant, taller, better built, and absolutely good-looking. However, when he came back, he brought someone with him, a friend whom he introduced as a potential girlfriend, Nicole Lively. Chantel never saw the signs. Whenever Evan visited Rose Hills, they chatted like old times. She was always very transparent about her attraction towards him. Yet he never shut her down. Imagine her surprise and dismay when he returned with a woman he was casually dating at that time. The oddest part was how Nicole Lively looked somewhat similar to her. Nicole had long blonde hair, amber-colored eyes, and the same nose. If not for Chantel's blue orbs, more prominent jawlines, and tall figure, they were almost the same. It wasn't just Chantel who was disappointed when Evan brought home a girl. His father, Eric Thompson, was so furious that he tried to push Nicole away. He paid her off to leave the city, but she never took the bait. After some time, Evan's father forced him to marry Chantel. He would have been disowned if he had not. It was Eric's way of declaring that Nicole Lively had no place in their family. Yes, Chantel was selfish. The thought of Evan being with another woman made her incredibly resentful. So when Evan's father insisted on their marriage, she willingly agreed. Chantel was only 20 when she married Evan, still studying biochemistry at a local university that her father co-founded. But that did not stop her from being with the man she had loved. She thought this was her chance. Eventually he would love her. She loved Evan so much, and would do anything for him. To be with him, including working with Eric Thompson to keep Nicole Lively away. Eric and Chantel tried everything. With her own family's influence, they banned Nicole from entering the city. For over a year, Nicole was out of the picture. However, Chantel had to admit the woman had her ways. Nicole found her way back to Rose Hills with Evan's help. Now that I hold power and my father can no longer run the company, I can finally make this decision with no one to threaten me, Evan coldly said. I want you out of my life, Chantel. But Evan, I love you, she admitted. Water welled in her eyes this time. I did everything for you to love me. Since I was young, you knew I have always loved you. She kneeled in front of Evan and wrapped her arms around his knees. She begged, please don't leave me. I love you so much. But I don't love you. I never did. Evan forced his frame away from her. He then slammed the papers against the living room table. With how strongly he struck the table, Chantel shuddered, feeling chills down her spine. For seconds she remained silent, gawking at the document. This is it. It has come to this. Despite everything I had done to earn his love, Chantel said to herself. Her breathing became labored as tears finally rolled down her face. Chantel felt utterly defeated. Her mouth parted, yet no words left her lips. Before she could respond, Evan groaned, saying, You are unbelievable. What happened to the Chantel I used to know? What does he mean? I am still the same Chantel, except I tried to fight for what I thought was right for me. Him, his love. She pondered deeply. Fuck. He clenched his jaws before saying, I'm leaving. I have better things to do than deal with you. Pointing to the divorce agreement, he said, I'll give you 1 week. 1 week to sign that document. He stood up and put on his coat. As he did, Chantel asked, Where? She gulped. Where are you going? None of your business. He took a few steps forward and then purposely said, Maybe I'll stay at Nicole's apartment. Anywhere but here. The next thing Chantel heard was the loud banging of their double doors. Chapter 2. Selfish? Yes, that was true. It was because she loved Evan so much. Insecure? How could she not be? Knowing that Nicole Lively was at arm's length, Chantel's insecurity grew. Chantel and Evan had a relatively tranquil marriage for more than a year. It wasn't fruitful or romantic, the dream marriage she wished for, but at least they were civil. Occasionally, they spent quality time as a married couple. Occasionally, they had made love. Chantel could tell that Evan had tried. However, 6 months ago, she received an anonymous message, tipping her of Nicole Lively's return. She became paranoid. She kept prying, infuriating Evan with her constant interrogating and snooping. He started bringing up a divorce since. Eventually, whoever gave her clues sent her photos of Evan and Nicole together, having lunch, or taking her to a luxury apartment building. That was when Chantel pursued to know where Nicole lived. So when she found out that Evan was paying for the apartment, she stormed into the apartment building and gave Nicole a piece of her mind. Chantel made sure everyone in the building knew that Nicole was a mistress. Naturally, Evan found out about it. That was how they wound up in their most noteworthy argument, within the living room of their villa. So yes, she was selfish and insecure, but that was all because of her love for Evan. What hurt Chantel the most, however, were Evan's words. I don't love you. I never did. She thought. If there was no ounce of affection for her, then why? Why would he touch her? She ridiculed herself, still sitting on the floor. She muttered, I guess I'm just the convenient partner. Of course, Chantel. You already know this, she added. Evan had never told her he loved her. He never even said he liked her. She was just someone his father forced him to marry. Chantel got up from the floor when she realized the maids were staring at her. They must have overheard. How shameful. How pathetic. She picked up the divorce papers and went to the master's bedroom. It was then that she read the terms of the contract. To set Evan free, she would get $10 million as alimony. Chantel set the document aside and stood in front of a full-length mirror. Watching the stain on her face, the bags around her eyes, and her skinny frame, she murmured, How pitiful. Before she became Mrs. Thompson, she was once the most sought-after young girl in college. She could not count the number of men who confessed their love for her. Yet she chose to be with a man who did not love her. How pathetic. She told herself. Chantel, you are so pathetic. It's fair to say that love can turn one into someone foolish. Chantel was only 22 years old. She graduated at the top of her class in biochemistry, finishing her degree in 7 semesters. She wasn't supposed to be someone who felt unloved and unwanted. She was meant to be greater. After finishing college, she was so hung up, knowing that Nicole was just around the corner, that she did not even think about herself or her career. She had always wanted to become a doctor, a surgeon, but that would mean leaving the city to pursue medicine, allowing Nicole to see her husband freely. Thus she gave up on that idea. After studying herself in the mirror, Chantel looked around the room. Her eyes landed on the portrait of her and Evan. It was a picture of them on their wedding day. She noted how she was so happy. Her eyes were gleaming in the photo, but as she glanced at Evan's face, her heart sank. In that photo, there was only hurt in Evan's expression. Guilt washed over her. Then after some time she laughed. The kind of laughter that was mixed with misery. Indeed, she was pathetic. She was at fault for marrying Evan against his will. If she had said no back then, he would have been free to choose, and she would not be in such a wretched state. Chantel did not know for how long she reflected on her decisions in life, but before dozing off to sleep that night, she admitted, "You are right, Evan. You are right. I am to blame for this. Mrs. Thompson, have dinner. You barely ate for 2 days." Mrs. Shaw, their house caretaker, walked in the door, forcing Chantel to get up from the bed. Chantel did not know how, but she managed with only water and bread for 2 days. That was how depressed she had become after Evan gave her the divorce papers. "I brought your dinner instead, so you don't have to go out," Mrs. Shaw said. Mrs. Shaw urged Chantel to eat. She did not leave, making sure Chantel filled her stomach. After Chantel finished half her plate, she smiled and said, "Mrs. Shaw, thank you for taking care of me. Thank you for being my constant companion here at home." But the words were stuck in her throat, and she cried, saying, "I'm afraid I must leave. I'm afraid I have pushed myself too hard on Evan's life that he hates me. Sure, Mrs. Thompson, you are a good person. You just need to learn that love cannot be forced," Mrs. Shaw said. "If you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it's yours. If it doesn't, then it never was." Chantel smiled at Mrs. Shaw. She acknowledged, "Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. I guess I know that already. I was really hoping he would love me one day." Mrs. Shaw nodded. She had been working with Evan's family for years. When Evan moved to his marital home, the Thompsons asked her to take care of the newlywed couple. She had known Chantel since she was in high school. The Scotts were constant visitors to the Thompsons' home. Thus, Mrs. Shaw was aware of her kind nature. But Chantel slowly changed since she married Evan. Mrs. Shaw tried to mind her own business, but this time, she could not help but give Chantel her advice. If they were both unhappy with the marriage, why stay? "Have you decided?" Mrs. Shaw asked. Chantel nodded and faintly replied, "Yes, I have." After Mrs. Shaw left, Chantel first took out a paper and pen. Evan has been bringing up the divorce since 4 months ago, but it was only in the past 24 hours that Chantel gave it enough thought. She sucked in a breath and wrote a letter to Evan. "My dearest Evan, you first helped me with my math homework when I was 10. Your technique for mastering mathematics was excellent. I thought you were so brilliant. Remember when my parents were so busy because of a doctor's conference my father had to attend? Mom and Dad had to leave me in your house, and we made a mess of the kitchen, making pancakes. I enjoyed those happy times with you. When I was 12, our families went camping by the lake, and you saved me after falling into the water. That was the first time I felt I truly liked you. Even if I was just a kid, I was crazy about you. I only told you about how I felt when I was 13, because I knew you were leaving for college. Evan, my love for you is not shallow. It goes deeper than you can imagine, but I was wrong about how I showed my love. You are right. I should not have agreed to the marriage and trapped you into such a commitment. I've heard this line many times, but I have always denied it. Loving someone means setting them free. So here it is. I have already signed the divorce papers. I hope you and Nicole will find happiness. I'm sorry to have come between the two of you. Forgive me for being selfish. Forgive my childish ways. Goodbye, Evan. Take care. Love. Chantel. Chapter 3. Dark circles formed around her eyes as Chantel packed her bags at 5 in the morning. She kept returning to the closet and deciding on what to bring. Evan bought her a few dresses. Even if they were in a loveless marriage, somehow, he had thought about her. I think it's better not to bring anything that would remind me of Evan, she mumbled and resumed packing only those she bought with her father's money. When she was done, she called for her father's driver and asked him to pick her up. Only then did she read the terms of their divorce. She read it once and twice until it all sunk into her head. You are getting a divorce, Shanti. You are getting a divorce, she repeated. No more crying. Cry later when you are at home. $10 million. She reread. Evan would give her $10 million as alimony for accepting the divorce terms. Chantel marked out the alimony. She affixed her signature on the correction. Afterward, she cautiously signed her name on every page, and at the last part, she felt a knife stab her heart as she affixed her signature next to Evan's. For a moment, she wondered when he had signed this contract. When Chantel was done, her shaking hands placed the same document beside the table, and she sadly removed her wedding ring. Tears threatened to fall again, but she held back. Chantel allowed herself a few minutes to take it all in. Just as she was sitting on the bed, her phone buzzed. Immediately, she assumed it was her father's driver. To her surprise, it was the same anonymous number that had been telling her about Evan and Nicole. However, the message was bolder this time, declaring herself. Her eyes widened at what she saw, and her heart galloped. On her screen was a picture of Evan having coffee at an unfamiliar dining area. From the photo, Chantel could tell that Evan had just woken up. His hair was messy, and he wore his usual office attire, except it was all wrinkled. The message on her phone read, "No matter what you do, he will come back to me. He never loved you. Give up." Chantel's face turned ghostly white. She could not believe her eyes. Apparently, her mysterious tipper was none other than Nicole Lively herself. How brazen! Her mouth fell open as she threw her head back on the sheets. She laughed and laughed while tears streamed down her face. After what felt like 10 minutes of laughing and crying, her heart out, she replied to the message saying, "So it was you all along, Nicole. I would never have thought. Well, you can have him. I accept my defeat." Either way, Chantel had already signed the divorce papers and earnestly accepted that Evan did not love her. For seconds she contemplated what to do. Still, she thought it was necessary to let Evan know what Nicole had done. She took a screenshot of Nicole's message. Then she sent it to Evan. Chantel typed her message. "I agree to the divorce. You can have your $10 million. I don't need the money, Evan. I am Chantel Scott, daughter of the world-famous cardiosurgeon, Dr. William Scott. Thank you for everything, Evan, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." Before leaving, Chantel made sure that Evan would get her message clearly. She wrote added instructions in her letter. "By the way, I marked out the alimony and countersigned it. As I said in my text, you don't need to give me any money. And, I'm sorry about the picture message I sent you. I just thought you should know." The next call she received was that of her father's driver. She gave her room one last look before finally leaving her marital home. Last night, in a private room in an exclusive club, Evan was spending time with his friends. His brown-colored eyes narrowed at his drink. His perfectly sculpted and slightly bearded jaws clenched before gulping down a full glass of hard liquor. After settling the glass on the table, he ran his fingers through his dark brown hair and announced, "I'm divorcing Chantel." Dead air fell upon the room, but soon, one of his friends, Sean, asked, "I can't believe this. Are you serious, Evan?" "He is dead serious, man. We all knew he was always envious of our single blessed life," Wendell remarked before gulping down a full glass of wine. "What's going on?" Keith arrived, curious about the purpose of their gathering. Sean Ross, Keith Henderson, and Wendell Franco have been good friends with Evan since high school. They parted ways when they studied at different colleges, but they had always communicated with each other. Sean and Wendell first glanced at Evan. Seeing he was seriously drinking his liquor, Wendell revealed, "Evan is divorcing our beautiful Shanti." "What?" Keith asked with a frown. He sat next to Evan and poured himself a glass of wine. "Why? Why not?" Evan said back. "I never wanted to get married 2 years ago. I was 25 then, at the prime of my life. I had many plans. It was all my father's doing, and she wrote in on it. She is not that innocent. But I thought you both were fine last year." Sean asked, "Weren't you going out on occasional dates?" A few dinner dates were just a front to appease my father." Evan scoffed. His response was his way of justifying his decision. "I just endured it. But now that father no longer has the stamina to run the corporation, and he has no choice but to hand me the full authority, I am free to make my own choices. Besides, I have had enough of her being constantly jealous and insecure. Evan added. There was silence between the four friends, but eventually Keith sought. Is this because of Nicole Lively? I don't know, man. I mean, you have been spending time with Nicole lately. Plus, you kept that a secret from Shanti. It's natural for Shanti to be jealous, Wendell suggested. Who I make friends with is none of her business, Evan curtly pointed out, and then indulged himself in another glass of alcohol. Whose side are you on? The temperature in their room dropped instantly. It took minutes, and a few more drinks for Sean to break the ice. He asked, So you are only interested in becoming friends with Nicole? Or are you planning to make her your girlfriend after the divorce? Evan thought deeply about it. That was the plan before he was forced into marriage. Now, many things had changed, but of course, he still felt responsible for Nicole's well-being. Nevertheless, he wasn't sure how he felt about it. Despite his uncertainties, he retorted, Why not? I brought Nicole to Rose Hills 2 years ago with that intention. Evan immediately noticed the varied expressions of his friends. Keith scoffed. Sean sneered. Wendell bit his lip. All the more irritation filled his heart. What the hell is wrong with all of you? Evan cast them an intimidating glare as he questioned. Nothing, Evan. It's just that. Sean cautiously looked at Wendell and Keith. When he confirmed their minds were synced, he said, We don't get you, Evan. Keith nodded. He, for one, had known Chantel and Evan since they were young. Evan used to cherish Chantel, and their families always knew they would end up together. Everything changed when he came home one day and brought Nicole Lively. What do you mean you don't get me? Evan in his stern voice sought. Sure, they have similarities, but if you look closely, they are so far apart. And it's not just the look, it's everything else, Chantel's background, her character. Shaking his head, Keith said, Let me show you, Evan. With his left hand raised above his head, he said, This is Chantel. Then, he lowered his right hand below his waist and suggested, This is Nicole Lively. That's the difference between the two of them. Any man would want Chantel over Nicole. We don't get how you like Nicole over your wife, Keith said in a sarcastic tone. Then, Evan yelled, Why don't you marry her? Angered by his friend's idea, Evan pushed the liquor bottles off the table, spilling the contents on the tiles. He got up and fixed his coat, and acted to leave. Just when he had heard enough from his friends, Keith said back, Are you sure about that, Evan? Because if you are not interested in Shanti, I'd be more than happy to pursue her. The thought of Keith wooing his wife filled his heart with fury. Keith was a known playboy. He dated women left and right. He did not deserve someone like Chantel. He said back, Don't even think about it. Chapter 4. For an hour, Evan drove around town aimlessly, thinking about the divorce. Thanks to his so-called friends, he was second-guessing his decision. It was past midnight when he still had no specific direction where to go. He thought about going to a hotel or his office. But suddenly, he remembered one person who could understand him, Nicole. Thus, he drove to Nicole's apartment. When Evan arrived at the apartment, he rang the doorbell several times. Finally, when the door opened, he saw Nicole's smiling face. She was surprised to see him, and he could tell by how her eyes widened and gleamed. Faintly, she said, Evan, you are here. I need someone to talk to, Evan revealed. I hope you don't mind. Nicole quickly let him in and guided him to the living room. She said, What's bothering you, Evan? Then she frowned, and with a sad expression she asked, Did you fight with Chantel? I'm sorry. I don't know how she learned that I had returned. I was surprised when she came barging into my door last Tuesday. Nicole quickly cried and said, I should have never come back here and make trouble for you and Chantel Dash. I've asked for a divorce, Evan revealed. What? She asked in shock. I told Chantel I want a divorce. Since my father stepped down at the company, he can no longer force me to stay married to Chantel, Evan revealed, looking past Nicole. Are you sure? Nicole inquired. Evan groaned. He lowered his head and rested his face against his palms, saying, It has to be done. I want out. This wasn't how I wanted my life to be. Nicole stretched her hands to rub Evan's shoulder. She said, I know how you feel, Evan. It's hard when everything is taken from you. Like how your father deprived me of getting an opportunity here in Rose Hills. You and I both know what it feels like to be stuck in a situation you can't escape. In a caring tone, she added, I wholeheartedly support your decision. You deserve to make your own choices. To Evan, Nicole was a good listener, and that always gave him a sense of comfort. It reminded him of how he became friends with Nicole in the first place. When Evan was still taking his master's degree at Lockwood University, he met Nicole while borrowing a book from the library. She was working as a librarian there. At first, she quickly caught his attention because her back looked like Chantel's. Besides that, Nicole was very efficient in giving Evan the books required for his research. Then every time he visited the library they would chat briefly. Evan and Nicole seemed to like the same things. Outside the library, they often bumped into each other, especially in the places where Evan spent his free time. It was as if fate was bringing them together, that Evan casually dated her. So when it was time for Evan to take on a more prominent role at the company, he offered to bring Nicole to Rose Hills. He wasn't sure yet of how he felt about her back then. Nicole did not have friends or family, and Evan felt sorry for her. Evan thought, with his connections in Rose Hills, Nicole would have a better life in the city of his birth. Unfortunately for Evan, he forgot about one thing: Chantel Scott. He failed to factor in Chantel in his decision to bring a woman to Rose Hills. How could he forget that his parents had always wanted him to marry Chantel? Evan could only blame the distance. He was technically gone for 7 years, returning only a few days every year, and forgetting about that verbal arrangement between their families. However, before Evan could consider things thoroughly, his father acted harshly against Nicole. He looked down at her and tried to pay her off. When it did not work, and Nicole remained in the city, his father forced him to marry Chantel. Evan let out all his frustrations with Nicole. Feeling relieved, he said, "Thank you for hearing me out, Nicole. I'm glad I came here. Is it okay if I sleep in the guest room?" "Of course, Evan. Technically, this is your house," Nicole replied. Evan guided himself into the guest room. He smiled at Nicole, who was standing outside the door. He said, "Good night, Nicole." "Good night, Evan," Nicole answered with an amiable smile. When the door slammed shut, Nicole frowned. She was very disappointed that Evan did not let her in. She walked closer, and even tried to open the door. However, it was locked from the inside. She cussed but reminded herself of how Evan was divorcing Chantel. She made her way to her room and mumbled, "Be patient, Nicole. In due time. The wait is all worth it." In the morning, Nicole prepared breakfast for Evan. Then, recalling how Evan complained about Chantel's paranoia, she took a picture of him while drinking his coffee. Over the past few months, she had secretly sent clues to Chantel that Evan had been seeing her. The photos did not have to suggest that they were in a relationship. Nicole knew Chantel had always been insecure when it came to her. Since Evan was divorcing Chantel, she no longer hid her identity. "Soon, Evan will be mine, like it should have been 2 years ago, bitch." Nicole smirked as she sent the photo to Chantel. She gave Evan her back and awaited Chantel's reaction. After a few minutes, she received a response, and oh, how it was favorable to her. A sinister grin became painted on her face with the realization that Chantel had given up. She imagined herself living with Evan, sleeping beside him in the bed, and finally making love. Her relationship with Evan had always been ambiguous. When they were casually dating back in Lockwood City, they had kissed, but they had never gone beyond that. Evan never gave her a title, whether a girlfriend or a fling. When Evan married Chantel, everything changed. Evan held back with her, and put a distance between them. It was worse when Evan's father banned her from the city. She could not get a job, and Eric's men constantly threatened her away. Nicole had no choice but to stay away for over a year. Once in a while, she would reach out to Evan, but their communication was minimal. Finally, with her back in Rose Hills, and with Evan holding the CEO position of the Thompson Group of Companies, Nicole was more determined to be with Evan. She smirked as she thought, "Soon, with Chantel gone, Evan will remember who he truly likes, and that's me. I did not sacrifice so many years to fail." "Thanks for breakfast, Nicole. I better head back, and remember, you have an interview at the public library. Don't worry, Father would not interfere from now on. He has become tired of fighting me." "Really?" Nicole asked. "That's good news. That means I can finally pay you back for all the help you gave me." "No, don't pay me back. I owe you for what my father did," Evan suggested. He then turned in the direction of the common restroom and asked, "Can I use the toilet?" "Sure, Evan," Nicole said with a smile. She watched as Evan first attended to some of his messages. He left his phone on the table, before going to the restroom. Nicole was cleaning the table when she saw Chantel's message. Her hands itched to see what Chantel had to say, especially since she had revealed herself to her. Thus she opened the text. Thankfully, Evan's mobile was still open from his earlier use. She did not need his password at that point. When she saw that Chantel had sent a screenshot of her picture message, Nicole panicked. Even if she had used an alternate number, it was obvious that the picture came from her. The angle of where the photo was taken gave it away. Evan can't know. She quickly deleted the screenshot Chantel sent, including the message where she had agreed to the divorce. Bitch, do you think that will work? She laughed. She rolled her eyes and said, sorry, Evan will never know about it. You are such a loser, Chantel Scott. Chapter 5. Sweetheart, if he can't appreciate you, then he doesn't deserve you, Dr. William Scott said. I'm glad you have come to that decision. William and Eleanor Scott embraced their weeping daughter inside the Scott's family mansion. I loved him, Dad, Mom. How I wish it did not have to end this way, Chantel expressed. But her mother cut her off. But more importantly, you have to love yourself, Eleanor suggested. As Chantel pulled away from her parents, her father suggested, it's time to put yourself first, my dearest Shanty. When you married Evan, you lost yourself, your dreams and aspirations. I know you loved Evan, but there's more to life than that boy. William lifted Chantel's chin and suggested, you deserve better. If it were 2 years ago, William would have wanted Evan as a son-in-law, but since Chantel married him, he saw through her sadness. In the first few months of their marriage, his daughter was still elated at being with Evan. However, as the months passed, he could see Chantel's longing to be loved. Recently, she has been crying more often. She lost so much weight, and was never interested in anything else but following Evan around. It pained William to see his daughter this way. Chantel was never lacking in love. Everyone around her loved her. For his daughter to feel so unwanted, to become doubtful of herself hurt William the most. He had long been asking Chantel to get a divorce, but she always insisted that their marriage was getting better day by day. Of course, that was not what he saw. Finally, they were going to be separated. He did not care who initiated it. What mattered most was how his daughter would be free to live her life. He urged, let's leave this town. Let's relocate to where you can pursue medicine. William smiled and suggested, become a surgeon like me. In William's view, taking Chantel away was the best solution. His daughter may appear strong right now, decided on the separation, but he knew well that Evan was her weakness. She could easily crawl back into his arms, and it wasn't because his daughter had no brain. She was too in love with Evan, and it clouded her judgment. Chantel sighed and contemplated. After some time she weakly replied, okay, father. I agree with your plans. I'm glad you approve, William answered. Then your mother and I will prepare for everything. I'll have the house for sale. I don't want us coming back here, even if it means cutting my friendship with the Thompsons. But Dad, that would mean your work. Chantel asked. I will resign from St. Dominique's Hospital as their director. I will sell my shares at the university. I can easily find work elsewhere, being the best cardio surgeon in the world, William suggested. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take care of you. I have a city in mind. Worlington. They have the best training facility for surgeons, he revealed. As soon as I can find a home, I'll move you out of Rose Hills. Days passed. Mr. Thompson, sir. I'm very sorry, but my mother was admitted to the hospital because of pneumonia the other day. May I please be allowed to review the documents at the hospital? James, Evan's assistant, asked. I will bring my laptop with me. You will bring your laptop to the hospital? Evan leaned back and sighed. He finally understood why his assistant had been so exhausted recently. He shook his head and suggested, take 2 days off and attend to your mother. I'll ask Shirley to cover your work. Get some proper sleep while you are at it. James' eyes lit up. He quickly bowed and said, thank you, Sir Thompson. Thank you so much. I will give Shirley my endorsements. Evan brushed off his assistant with a hand, saying, go. Take care of your mother. Sir, since you allowed me to take a leave, James said, may I recommend that you also get a good sleep yourself? Evan froze. Was it that obvious how he had been struggling to rest for many nights? He glanced at his private room next to the office and gasped. Maybe he needed a good sleep. At home. the same home he shared with Chantel. Again, he sucked in a breath, knowing it was finally time to deal with the divorce. Evan had yet to return home for more than a week. It was beyond the time that he gave Chantel. Could she have already signed the divorce papers? There was only one way to find out. He turned to James and said, "You are right." "Thank you, James." "You are welcome, sir." "Good night," James said before leaving the CEO's office. "Mrs. Shaw, I have several clothes from the office needing laundry. Kindly take care of them," Evan said as soon as he entered the villa. "Oh my, Mr. Thompson, you have been staying too much in the office. You used up all your spare clothes," Mrs. Shaw said. "Have you eaten dinner? I can make one very quickly." When Mrs. Shaw suggested she prepare his dinner, he frowned and asked, "Shanty did not make my dinner?" Sure, he gave Chantel divorce papers, but she had always attended to his needs, even when they were arguing. The fact that she did not cook dinner was surprising to him. Mrs. Shaw was taken aback by Evan's probing. She knotted her brows and asked, "But sir, aren't you getting a divorce? She left 3 days after you and the missus quarreled in the living room last week." Immediately, Mrs. Shaw lowered her head saying, "I'm sorry to pry. Your voices were so loud it was hard not to listen." "I see." Evan frowned. He could not believe it. "She left?" "Yes, sir. She has left some papers on your bedside table," Mrs. Shaw revealed. Evan skipped dinner altogether. He went straight to the bedroom and saw the papers, exactly as Mrs. Shaw had disclosed. When he moved closer, he understood it was the divorce agreement. He was surprised that Chantel signed it, even without making a drama. She did not go to his office. She did not call or send him any messages these past few days. Evan did not also get a call from his father, which meant his family had not learned about his decision to divorce Chantel. Evan picked up the two-toned wedding ring that was meant for Chantel. He unwittingly studied the ring on his finger and muttered, "She signed it. She really signed it." His brows met. Evan thought he would be relieved, but why did it feel like his chest was heavy? He was about to remove his wedding ring when he discovered another paper underneath the divorce agreement. He picked it up and recognized it was a letter addressed to him. Lazily, he flipped the paper open and read it. "My dearest Evan." The weight on Evan's chest felt heavier in each line of the letter. Chantel recounted the years when they were young. Somehow, it also reminded Evan of how close they were back then. Eventually, his eyes landed on the last words, which appeared to have been written as a follow-up. It read, "By the way, I marked out the alimony and countersigned it. As I said in my text, you don't need to give me any money. And I'm sorry about the picture message I sent you. I just thought you should know." He raised a brow and wondered, "A message? She sent a message?" Evan found it strange, because he had never received a single message from her. Chapter 6. Good morning, Evan. I love you. Evan smiled in his dream, hearing Chantel repeat those words. She never got tired of expressing how she felt. In his dream, he did not respond, but he sensed the warmth in his heart. Suddenly, he heard his phone buzz. It was his wake-up call. "Shanty, can you turn off the alarm, please? I want to sleep longer. It's Saturday." Evan groaned in his sleep. Shanty. His eyes opened, realizing he was calling out his wife's name. He sat up and turned to the empty side of the bed. Then his gaze landed on the bedside table. When he saw the divorce papers and the letter she wrote, it dawned on him how Chantel was already gone. Right. She left, Evan said under his breath. Again, this was supposed to be his happiest moment. He was free. All he needed to do was to formalize the divorce, and he would be officially a single man. But why was his chest still feeling heavy? It had not felt any better since he learned about Chantel's leaving. He noticed his phone was ringing. He checked it and saw it was Nicole calling. He ignored it at first and just lay on the bed. When his phone continued to ring, he groaned in irritation and answered it. "Nicole. I got the job from the public library. It's like what you said. Your father did not interfere." There was a smile in her tone when Nicole added, "Evan, I can't thank you enough. How about we have dinner to celebrate? I can cook for you." Evan glanced at the bedside table. Then he replied, "I can't. I have to hand to my lawyers the divorce papers." "Oh, did Chantel sign it?" Nicole probed. Yes, she did," Evan blandly answered. There was not a hint of happiness in his voice. "That's even more reason to celebrate." Come on, Evan. Let's have lunch together, Nicole kept insisting. Evan sighed and responded, I'm sorry, Nicole, but I have things to do. Next time. He ended the call without letting Nicole finish, and then he started staring at his phone, going through his messages. Recalling Chantel's letter, he wondered, which message was she referring to? From one app to another, Evan checked all his messengers, but he did not find any recent texts or messages from Chantel. He frowned and pondered what she meant. Soon, he attempted to call Chantel's phone. The person you are calling is out of reach. Again and again he called. Since he could not get through, he sent her a message. Shanti, I got your letter. Thank you for signing the divorce papers. I know you said you did not want the alimony, but I will still transfer the funds to you. By the way, I did not get any message from you, despite what you have written in your letter. Evan spent an hour waiting in bed, but Chantel did not reply. He went down to have his late breakfast. When Chantel still did not respond, he sent another message. Shanti, we could still be friends. We have known each other since we were young. We don't need to be strangers. He bathed and changed into a new set of clothes. Evan left to meet his lawyers, and, after handing in the divorce papers, he decided to pay his father and mother a visit. When he entered the gates to the old Thompsons' mansion, Evan felt tensed. It was about time for him to tell his parents of his decision to divorce Chantel. He did not know how they would take it. His parents, Eric and Clara Thompsons, genuinely loved Chantel as their daughter-in-law. Are my parents here? Evan asked. Yes, sir. They are in the garden with Miss Scott, the maid said. Instantly, Evan knew what was going on. He looked outside and realized that the Scott's car was parked next to his father's. Chantel was here to report their divorce. Many possibilities played in his head. Yet again he was angered. He was prepared to defend himself should his father retort by threatening him again. Evan marched with heavy steps until he found himself in the gardens. What he saw broke his heart. He could make out how the news saddened his parents. Eric and Clara were embracing Chantel with tears in their eyes. His wife was doing the same, weeping. Evan, Clara, his mother, called. You are here. The embrace between the three broke off, and Evan could finally see Chantel. It was obvious that she had been crying, observing the bags around her eyes. Chantel tells me you have finally divorced? Clara said in a soft tone. Then, to Evan's surprise, his father said, I guess it's better. I'm tired of forcing this onto you both. Don't worry, Evan. Chantel had told me it was her decision, so I respect it, Eric said. What? That came as an amazement to Evan. If his father knew it was his decision, a debate would happen again. He secretly thanked Chantel for that. Aunt, uncle, I have to go. Chantel sniffed her tears away and said, Goodbye. Goodbye, Shanti. We love you, dear. Good luck with everything, Clara said, waving goodbye. Chantel walked past Evan, not minding him for a second. It wasn't like her at all. Evan asked silently, Did she just ignore me? A big part of Evan was dumbfounded. She never ignored him. Noticing how she kept walking without glancing at him, he said, I tried calling you. Chantel raised a brow and softly replied, I changed my number. And just like that, Chantel walked away. She did not even say goodbye, or give Evan her new number. A month passed. Miss Shanti said to thank you for the divorce certificate. Howard, the Thompsons' family driver, said in front of Evan. With his money and connection, Evan quickly got the divorce certificates done. Officially, he was already a free man. Clearing his throat, Evan asked, Is that it? Did she say anything else? Nothing, sir. She just accepted it and returned to whatever it was she was doing. The Scotts appeared to be busy. Howard shrugged. Their maids were walking in and out of the house, carrying boxes. Maybe they were cleaning the house. I see, Evan replied, inwardly disappointed. Thank you, Howard. Oh, and dash. Evan reached for a gift box inside his drawers and gave it to Howard. This is for your son. He smiled and added, I remember he liked baseball. Wendell sold some of his card collections. I figured Clark would love this, Evan added. Howard had a huge smile on his face. He answered, Thank you, sir. You are very thoughtful. Don't mention it. I just remembered, Evan replied, and Howard left his office. Half bothered by Chantel's pure silence, Evan went about his work. As he did, he kept reminding himself how this was his decision. and that it was best for both of them, him and Chantel. In the evening, he received an invitation from his friend Sean. They wanted to have drinks at the club. At the same time, he received a text from Nicole. She said, "Evan, let's celebrate. I got my first salary from the library, but I don't have any friends to celebrate it with. Please, Evan." Evan felt responsible altogether. He had been busy with work and had not also visited Nicole. Thus, he wound up inviting her to the club. Instead of a private room, like they usually had, Sean booked a secluded booth at the club. Keith and Wendell were already there. "Hey." Sean's mouth fell open when he saw Nicole. He said, "Oh hey Nicole. Hi guys, I hope you don't mind that I join you?" Nicole said, giving off that amiable smile. "Swear. It's fine," Sean responded awkwardly. "You remember Wendell and Keith, right?" "Hi everyone. Nice to see you again," Nicole replied. The music was on at the club. The DJ played the most upbeat tune, and a few guests started dancing. On the other hand, Evan's group enjoyed their drinks, discussing businesses and whatnot. "You know, Nicole, I honestly thought you were so familiar, even during the first time Evan brought you to our circle," Wendell suggested. "Have we met before?" "Maybe it's just me, but I thought your eyes were familiar," Wendell added. Nicole smiled and said, "No, it can't be. It was my first time to be here in Rose Hills 2 years ago." "Whoa, isn't that Shanti?" Sean asked, seeing a girl in a sexy white dress that hugged her body, her blonde hair bouncing as she danced with 3 other girls. "Whoa," Wendell hissed. Keith, on the other hand, whistled. "Damn, I knew she had a sexy body beneath those jeans and long dresses." Announcement, everyone. Another girl with short black hair took the microphone from the DJ. She said, "Meet my girl Chantel Scott. We are celebrating her divorce. She is a hot sexy ass who is single and ready to mingle." Evan's nose flared. His eyes widened in shock.